Now in this moment, it's time to start over. Open your heart, you know there's nothing to forgive. Starting now in this moment, it's time to start over. Open your heart, you know there's nothing to forgive. Starting now in this moment, it's time to start over. Starting now, open your heart and know there's time to start. Starting now, and your heart starting now. Starting now, this moment, it's time to start. Starting now, and your heart it's time to start. Starting now, and your heart starting now. Start.
All people complain that they haven't enough time. They look at their lives from too human a point of view. There's always time to do what God wants us to do. We must put ourselves completely in each moment that he offers us. In Paul's letter to the Ephesians, be most careful then how you conduct yourself, like sensible men, not like simpletons. Use the present opportunity to the full, for these are evil days. So do not be fools, but try to understand that what the will of the Lord is. I went out, Lord. People were coming and going, walking and running. We have side one here.
Cars, trucks, streets, the whole town. People were rushing after this time. They were rushing after time, to catch up with time, to gain time.
I can't accept having no time. Can't think, I can't read. I'm swamped. I haven't time. I'd like to pray, but I haven't time. The school children have their work to do. They haven't time later on. Young people at their sports, they haven't time later on. The grandparents have their grandchildren, they haven't time later on. They're dying, they have no. Too late. They have no more time. But we must not lose time, waste time, kill time. For time is a gift that you give us, but a perishable gift, a gift that does not keep. Lord, I have time. I have plenty of time. All the days you give me, the years of my life, the days of my years, the hours of my days are mine. Quietly, calmly, but to fill completely up to the brim, to offer them to you, to do conscientiously in the time you give me what you want me to do. I invite you to be seated.
I'm supposed to introduce Mike. You know him. So little housekeeping, restrooms, or you know where they are. If I don't hear any kids, so don't worry about restless kids. The offering basket and the baptismal font is if you wish to make a donation to Catholic Charities, which I hope you do. As Valimar, who will be here in April, she says, you are the primary choir, so if you are invited to join to sing with us, please do. Okay, so I'm going to do the text here. Tonight's presenter is someone you probably already know, Fr.Mike Eckley, with his Killebrew jersey on. He gave me the pucket. Fr.Mike, I'll give it back. Fr.Mike is an Omaha native and grew up in Our Lady of Lourdes Parish. He holds a Bachelor's of Arts degree in history from the University of St. Thomas, a Master's of Divinity from Did you get a master's degree?
What's that?
Did you get an actual master's degree, or did you get a...
I didn't get a Master of Arts, Master of Divinity.
Okay, all right, so did I. The Master's of Divinity from St. Paul Seminary, University of St. Thomas. He was ordained in June of 1991. After ordination, Mike served as associate pastor of St. Mary's in West Point, St. Bernadette. You had 3 associate jobs?
Yeah, it was with Dan Soltis, yeah.
Wow, I only had 2. St. Bernadette in Omaha and St. Patrick's in Fremont. He was pastor of St. Patrick's in Battle Creek for how many years?
5 years.
5 years, and then I followed you.
Right.
Right? Then was moved to St. Rose and St. Lawrence in Hooper and Scribner. Pastor at St. Augustine Indian Mission in Winnebago, which I'm sure was an amazing experience. Catcher, Omaha Padres.
What's it?
I'm just reading what's put in front of me. So in the I-80 Collar Series, you were the catcher. Okay. Most importantly, pastor here. And I still consider him the pastor here. From 2011 to 2018, where oversaw the renovation of the church. It was finished in 2012 and the 60th anniversary of St. Pius X Parish. In 2018, Mike was appointed as the servant minister for the Omaha Archdiocese and is in residence at Our Lady of Lourdes, St. Adalbert. He currently serves as the executive director interim.
No interim.
No interim?
No.
Wow. He currently serves as the executive director of Catholic Charities in Omaha. As you've noticed, I followed Father Mike around. He was the pastor at St. Patrick's in Battle Creek. I followed him. He was pastor here. I followed him. And finally, it says your personal comments about that here. I better let know. Mike, we're very happy to have you back here tonight. And let me give you a serious welcome. Nobody wants to hear me play.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm very thrilled to be here. As I mentioned in my homilies this weekend, thrilled to be back here at St. Pius and also for this parish mission. As many of you know, this parish mission was supposed to take place last year. And because of COVID, it was not able to happen. And just to give you a little bit of background of the theme of this, and you notice the baseball uniform, talked about spring training. Father Joe has his my jersey on. The theme came up to me 2 years ago. Right before Lent, I had the opportunity to be with a couple priest friends down in Florida. And it was right before Lent. It was in late February, and spring training was going on. And being a baseball fan, I'd never been to a spring training game. I've been down to Kansas City to see the Royals play. I've been up to Minnesota many times to see the Twins play. Whenever I'm on a conference or a business trip or on vacation, if I'm in a major league city, the first thing I check to see is if there's a game going on when I'm going to be there. And I like to go and see the stadium, see a game. Well, we're having the opportunity where we're staying at Port St. Lucie. We're just a few miles from the New York Mets training camp. And one of the afternoons, they were playing the Detroit Tigers. And so I had the opportunity to go over there and watch a game. And it was a great day. It was in the 70s, sunny. Beer was cold. Hot dogs were hot. The baseball was bad. The baseball was bad. They had more errors than they had scores. The two teams combined to about 18 errors that day. But it was spring training. And that's the whole point of spring training, is to get ready for the season. And so a lot of young players are there, a lot of veterans also, but they're getting back into playing. And what they're doing is going back to the fundamentals and the basics. They are practicing, they're playing these exhibition games, and they're getting back to the fundamentals. And all of them have been playing baseball since they were kids. Played Little League, played high school, some in college, through the minor leagues, and now they're in the major leagues. But yet, they still have to go and practice and work on the basics. And Lent is our spring training. We're called to go back to the basics, to go back to simple, proven disciplines: prayer, fasting, and almsgiving. And each night I'm going to talk about one of those. Tonight, talking about prayer. But it's that call to get back to these fundamentals. It's not complicated, and it's not meant to be complicated. Sometimes I tend to overcomplicate things myself. Years ago, I had the opportunity when I was graduating college, and before I entered graduate school, I spent the summer in Alaska working at Camp St. Teresa, which was a Catholic youth camp on the Kenai Peninsula. It was run by the Archdiocese of Anchorage. And as we were planning for it and preparing for it, I went up with another seminarian. He was going to be the religious ed director. I was the camp cook for the 8 weeks of camp. And we talked about, how to get there, and it was an adventure getting up there. Because I flew into Minneapolis, he drove into Minneapolis from Rapid City. Another woman who had just graduated with us, she was also going to work at the camp, and her grandparents drove us to Winnipeg. And then from Winnipeg, we took a train to Prince Rupert. We took a ferry from Prince Rupert to Haines, Alaska, and the brother who ran the camp came down and picked us up in a pickup truck, and we drove the last 900 miles on the Alaskan highway to Anchorage. We lost 3 tires in the 2 days that we were on the road and driving. It was a great adventure. It was a great fun, and that whole summer was a great adventure. But as I was getting ready for it, Father Mark McCormick, who is the other seminarian, he's now a priest of the Diocese of Rapid City, he said, I was reading, and he said, we should probably just take a backpack. And that's all we need. And the suggestion was you lay out everything that you think you're going to need, and then you put half of it back away. And so that's what he did. That's what Dana, the woman that we were traveling with, also did. I had a backpack, 2 suitcases, and a box with me. And getting through customs, traveling for a week, because it took us 8 days. From the time I left Omaha till the time we pulled into Anchorage was 8 days, a Sunday to Sunday. And dragging that with me, and then realizing when I was up there, most of that I didn't need. I tend to make things more complicated and more difficult than they really need to be. And in this Lenten season, we're called to that simplicity, called back to the basics. And it really matches up well this year with baseball. I was looking, pitchers and catchers reported on February 17th. February 17th was Ash Wednesday, the beginning of Lent. So spring training started on Ash Wednesday. The first professional baseball game, opening day, is April 1st, Holy Thursday. And as you know, when we enter into Holy Thursday, that night, Lent is over, and we enter into the Easter Triduum. And it matches up very well this year with our Lent. We're called to this simplicity, to get back to those basics. And when I was developing this, when I was thinking about this, I also thought how this matches up very well with the Archdiocese in its vision. and it's Pastoral Priorities. And I want to talk about those each night. We have 3 priorities, and the 3 priorities are to create a culture of encountering Jesus and equipping disciples, create a culture that enables God's mercy to be received and lived, and create a culture of unity. Tonight, along with prayer, is that create a culture of encountering Jesus and equipping disciples. Because it is through our prayer that we do encounter Jesus. And it's where we're equipped and receive the graces that we need to be his disciples, to go forth into the world, to bring his message in what we say and what we do. And so those match up very well. The Archdiocese, and this was done a little over 5 years ago, it'll be 6 years this summer, when they had this visioning process. And I was privileged to be one of the 2 priests of the Archdiocese who were part of this whole process of this visioning for the purposes. But the purpose statement of the Archdiocese is that it is to be a part of the living body of Christ, welcoming and inspiring every person to live as a vibrant disciple of Jesus Christ, so that all may respond to their vocation to holiness, be sent out as leaven to transform the world and fulfill their deepest human desire. That is the mission statement of the Archdiocese. And those priorities come out of that. The priority of equipping disciples, the priority of mercy, and the priority of unity. The motto of the Archdiocese, does anyone know it? One church, equipping disciples, living mercy. So that unity, that equipping, I forgot encountering Jesus in there. One church, encountering Jesus, equipping disciples, living mercy. That is the motto of the Archdiocese. If you go on the website, you'll see that almost right up front in there. It is what we are called to be and what we're called to do, but it starts with that prayer. It starts with the basics of that prayer. I want to thank you for taking the time to be here, and thank all those that are live streaming also of being here. That opening prayer, I heard a long time ago, I heard the first time when I was in the seminary. It's been used many times on different kinds of retreats, but that reminder that we only have a limited amount of time, and how important it is that we prioritize our time. I have found, especially since the beginning of this year, how much time I have when I don't fill it with stuff that's not necessary. And what's prompted me to do that is right after Christmas, there's a group of men at Our Lady of Lourdes where I'm living, and they asked me after Mass if I would want to join them in Exodus 90. And Exodus 90 is a program for men to go through the book of Exodus on 90 days, starting January 4th, ending on Easter Sunday. And part of that is some asceticisms, giving things up. And the things that we're invited to give up that have really changed and transformed is no sports on television. I spend a lot of time in my car during Creighton games. I figure out errands that need to be run and things that I need to do. No extra television either. No unnecessary use of social media and use of computer. Now, I use my computer every day. I use my phone every day for the work that I do. But not having that unnecessary time for that is freed up a lot of time. And realize how much time I waste. Like that prayer, waste time, kill time. There's a lot of time in my day that I realize that just gets wasted. And sometimes I get to the end of the day, or I have gotten into the end of the day, and it's been busy, and I may have celebrated Mass or celebrated other sacraments, but realize I didn't take that time for some quiet. Hit the ground running and just keep going. And then a lot of times I'm too tired at the end of the day to just concentrate on prayer. And so it's really finding that time. That time is essential. to make sure that we have that time and to set it aside. And I realize if I don't do that, it doesn't get done. If I put it off, I'm going to end up putting it off for a long time. And so it's scheduling that in, making that just as important as anything else that I do. You know, when it comes to eating, you can tell I haven't missed a lot. Now I'm trying to slim down. I've been working on it recently, but my day gets busy and I do miss a meal. But I've never gotten to the part where I've starved to death. I may be very hungry. I may get to the end of the day and realize I didn't have anything to eat and eat something then. But I've never been in a situation where I've been literally starving. We know that there are people in our world that do starve, that don't have access or not have the ability to acquire food. But that's not the reality for most all of us. And none of us have really starved. We may have missed a meal. And one of the things that I realize is I have to see prayer in that same way. Because it truly does. When I miss it, something gets starved and dies off inside of me. Something is missing. And that basic openness to grace and peace is gone. If it goes for a long period of time, then there is a restlessness I know in myself. I'm not able to deal with the things that I need to deal with day in and day out because I don't have that strength. I don't have that spiritual nourishment. And how important that is, that we don't starve ourselves spiritually. We need to take that time. One of my favorite stories of that is a young monk who goes to an older monk asking for advice on prayer. And the old monk says, well, follow me, and I'll show you how to pray. And they walk out of the monastery, and they walk into the woods, and the young monk is following. The older monk isn't saying anything. They get to a stream in the middle of the woods, and the old monk invites the young monk to kneel down next to the stream, and the young monk does. The old monk takes his shoulders and shoves him into the stream. And as he's fighting to get air, finally the old monk pulls him up. And he says, until you desire to pray as much as you just desire to breathe, you'll never learn to pray. And so a lot of times, that first step in growing in prayer, if we don't have that desire, if we don't sense that desire in ourselves, is to start praying for that desire. Start praying for that desire to come to the Lord in prayer. Because the Lord's desire is to be in union with us. The Lord desires us to come to Him and to be with Him. And He's always searching us out. But we need to take the time to do it. We need to set that time aside. One of the other obstacles besides time and taking that time and making that a priority, and I find in my own life, is sin. The sin that's part of each and every one of our lives. St. Teresa of Avila, in writing about prayer and writing about her own experience in prayer, confesses that for 1.5 years she did not pray. And one of the reasons she didn't pray, she didn't feel worthy to pray. And after that experience of not praying for that 1.5 years, she realized it was a sense of pride that her sins were so great that they were greater than God's ability to forgive and His mercy, and how just wrong she was and how much she needed the Lord. Our sins should never keep us separated from God. God sees all of us as His sons and daughters. And we're his worthy sons and daughters, and his desire is to be in union with us. And he continues to be present to us. And he's always going to be there. And if we come to him, and if we come to him humbly, we're going to be able to enter into that prayer. It's to start something during this Lenten season to grow in that prayer. You know, when I think of prayer, Jesus is the one who teaches us to pray. And the disciples recognize he has something. There's something different about him. Of course, he's the Son of God, but they said, teach us to pray as John taught his disciples. And Jesus is that model. He is the teacher of prayer. And when I think of prayer, I think of a tripod. There are three important legs for our own personal prayer that are essential. And if we take one of those out, we're not balanced in our prayer life. And they match up very much with the way that we live our lives as individuals. As human beings, we have the time for individual prayer, prayer with those that we're closest with, and prayer with the larger community. Just how we live our regular life. We spend time alone. For introverts, it's more essential to have that downtime, that time alone. One of the things I love about the job that I have, because I'm an introvert. At the core and at my heart, I'm an introvert. I do a lot of extroverted things. And I do that because it's important and I believe I'm called to it, but that's not the core of who I am. I'm not an extrovert. And so with being servant minister and traveling out and visiting my brother priest, I spend a lot of time on the road, and I love that time on the road. I love that quiet time. One of the hardest things for me when I first came here to St. Pius is my mom lived 15 minutes away and not an hour and a half away. Because on a Sunday afternoon, after I finished masses when I was in Hooper and Scribner, or when I was on the reservation, or even when I was out in Battle Creek, coming into Omaha, I needed that time. Now, I found ways to find that time here, and the rectory is a great rectory, and I had great space there to be able to go. But that time in the car was always my time, my downtime. 13 years ago, my dad died, and I was up on the reservation at the time. And I came down when he was in the hospital in those last days, and was staying at my parents' house, and was up at the hospital with the rest of my brothers and sisters and my mom. And then after he died, those first days, and my dad died on a Thursday. And we didn't want to rush the funeral and try to get everything in by Saturday, because it was late Thursday afternoon when he died. And Monday was the solemnity of the Immaculate Conception, December 8th. And so the funeral wasn't going to be until Tuesday. So there was that long gap, and I was spending time with family. The house was always full of people. My mom, recognizing that, came up to me at one point and she goes, "You need to go home and get your suit and get some other things and go away for a while." I don't know if she was trying to get rid of me there at the house. Actually, she recognized that need that I have, and she knows that about me. And she was saying, you need that time alone right now. You need to be able to process some of this, and to do that not with a lot of people around. When it comes to our prayer, we need that time alone with the Lord. We need that quiet time. Jesus is the model and example of that. In the New Testament, in the Gospels, 28 times, we are told Jesus went off by himself to pray, or Jesus spent the night on the mountain in prayer, or Jesus went away and prayed. Jesus is the model and example of that individual prayer. And it's so essential for us to have that. How we do that, there are many different ways of doing it. Some people like Eucharistic adoration. Some find a place in their own homes, a kind of a space that is their prayer space. Some like to walk and do it. Some like to reflect on Scripture, some the rosary. Whatever it may be, there's not a right or wrong. The only wrong is not to do it. But we need to take that time alone with the Lord. When he sends his disciples out on mission, he says when they come back, he says, "Come away with me to a quiet place." Now they don't get to a quiet place because the crowd finds out where they go and follows him. But his desire is to call us to a quiet place. And in this Lenten season, to find those ways to pray, to take that time for reflection, to take that time for prayer, in whatever way that may be. There are many different ways to do that, but it's important to do that. And it doesn't have to be an hour if you're not used to that. To start, 10 minutes, 15 minutes of quiet. But to start, there are two books that I recommend when it comes to this time in quiet prayer. The first is A Time for God by Father Jacques Philippe. He's written quite extensively about prayer. Time for God. And then the other one is written by a Jesuit, Christopher Collins, called 3 Moments of the Day. And in the 3 moments of the day, he talks about in the morning to have some kind of morning offering, whether it's a formal one or your own words of just a little bit of quiet time in the morning just to offer the day to the Lord. And then in some time during the day, some Eucharistic time, whether that be attending a daily Mass, coming into the church before the Blessed Sacrament, or if that's not possible, just to take a moment to pause during the day, just to recognize and realize Jesus' presence with you. And then the third moment is at the end of the day to do the daily examen. To take a little bit of time in the evening or at night or before bed for that examen of conscience. So that's 3 moments of the day. But very important in that individual prayer. The other is spending time with family and friends. Those that we're close with, praying with people that we're close with. When I was an associate in Fremont, someone asked me a recommendation for a book on prayer, and I'd made a recommendation by a book by Bill Hipsch. Bill had been in the seminary with me for 1 year. He had actually joined us in our 3rd year of theology. He had already had a master's degree in theology. He'd worked as a lay chancellor in one of the dioceses in Minnesota. And so he was in the seminary, and he just stayed 1 year, but he's written a number of books over the years. And in the book on prayer, I recommended that you read. And she came to me about a week into Lent. And she said, one of the things that I recognize that I'm really missing, she was a widow, is I'm missing my prayer partner. Not having that person in her life, her husband, who they prayed together often with. That not having him there was something she was missing, and trying to find that in the community with another friend. But how important it is for us to pray with those that we're closest with. One of my grandmother's sisters died a few years ago, and I was at the vigil service, and one of the prayers that they prayed was the Memorare. Because my great aunt and uncle, every night before they went to bed, prayed the Memorare together. And how important that was from their whole life, their whole marriage. They prayed together every night and prayed that prayer together. I had a number of years ago, that their schedules were so different. He was a farmer, she was teaching, and especially when it came to planting and harvesting season, it was very hard for them to match up their schedules. And so one of the things that I suggested is they get a reflection book, a daily reflection book, and the same one, and they would do the daily reflection when they had time to do it individually. And then when they did have a little bit of time, maybe in the evening or before bed, they would talk about what they were thinking about and praying about when they had that opportunity. But how important it is for families to pray together, for spouses to pray together, for friends gathered together to pray together. It's been an important part of my own spirituality in my own life. And that's that second leg, where there's that individual time and there's that time with those that we're closest with. My experience now is with my pre-support group. I had a group for 16 years when I was first ordained. And then after 16 years, the group kind of dissipated and was gone. And for a number of years, I didn't have a group. And recently, we formed another group. There's 3 of us to get together. And this past Tuesday, had the opportunity for a desert day. The 3 of us were just together for the whole day. We had some time of just visiting and laughing. We had some time to share a meal. Then we had time just quiet, where we kind of went and did our own thing, and then came back together, prayed together, and just did some sharing about our prayer and how things have been going recently. And how important that is to me. I've also been part of other groups, usually groups of men, and like I mentioned, right now I'm part of Exodus 90 group. There's 12 of us to meet together every Thursday evening, and we have been doing that since January 4th, and an opportunity to pray with others. And Jesus, again, is the model of that. He had a group of disciples around him. And we know the 12 that he chose, this more intimate and closer group. We heard last week in the Transfiguration how he took Peter, James, and John with him up on the mountain where he was transfigured before them. He drew a community together, and they prayed together. Much of Jewish celebration is not so much done in the synagogue and temple. There's parts of the faith that were done there. But the most important celebration of the year is the Passover. That's done in the home. The Sabbath evening meal together in the home. And prayer surrounding that, praying with those that we are closest with. That was the model of Jesus' life. And then that third leg of that tripod is that communal prayer. If we can switch that. That communal prayer of gathering together and praying with the larger group. Because we do that also. We spend time alone. We spend time with our family, friends, those that we're closest with. And then we do things like going to Memorial Stadium with 79,000 others of our closest friends, right? We go to things that we may have acquaintances, there's strangers there, people we don't know at all, but we gather together for a single purpose. And our communal worship is an important aspect of that. Jesus went to the synagogue and he did go to the temple. And he called us and instructed us to celebrate the Eucharist, to gather together. From the very beginning, the disciples formed communities, and how important that community is to our life as Christians and to our prayer life. That's an important aspect. I've heard many people over the years say, well, I'm a Christian, but I don't believe in going to church, right? I just go off by myself and pray. And that's good. That's one leg of the tripod. But that's not the whole tripod. Jesus instructed us to gather together, to pray together. And for us, the Eucharist is that gathering of coming together where he's truly present. And he comes and nourishes us and sends us forth as a community to continue that work, and how important that is to our spiritual life, to our prayer life, to have that aspect and to get back into that practice. I've heard so many people over this past year of how much they've missed Eucharist and how much they've missed gathering together with the community. And there's they're live streaming masses and they're watching those, or they're watching Mass for shut-ins, and that's great, and it's good that we've had that opportunity to do that. But there is that longing of being together. We need to be together. We're communal beings. As human beings, we need one another. And hopefully as things have gotten better, as numbers continue to drop of positive rates, as vaccines start to go up even more, that we'll be able to do that and open up more. It was great this morning at the 9:30 Mass. I think every pew was occupied and pretty full. And there's some people standing at the back. It was great to see that, and people are starting to return. I had a few people comment last weekend and this weekend that this is the first time they've been back to Mass since a year ago. But how much, and I realized how much I missed the community. Especially not having a regular Mass or regular parish. I was celebrating Mass at my dining room table during those first few months of COVID. And how much I missed the community being present and being there. It's so important for us as human beings to have that communal experience of prayer. And as we do all three of those, then it nourishes our spiritual life, and we continue to grow in that. That prayer alone, that prayer with those that we're closest to, and then that communal prayer. And each one of them are essential in Christian life. And Jesus is the model and example of that. And as we do that, we experience the fruits of that prayer. Most essentially is the fruit of peace. At least that's how I experience it. That when my prayer is good, when I'm disciplined and faithful to it, then I have more of a sense of peace. That doesn't mean everything outside is going well. It means everything inside is going well. Because that's the peace Jesus promises. Not that everyone's going to get along, not that everyone's going to agree, but that as we face those things, we come to it in a whole different way because we have the fruits of that prayer. We have the gift of his peace, the fruit of his peace there. And it's so important to hold on to those, because when we do pray, and we do take the time, and I've heard this many times, and I've experienced it myself, well, I pray and I get nothing out of it. Or it just seems very dry. Many of the saints experience that. We're not alone in that. What's important is that we're disciplined. That we're disciplined to keep going back to it, trusting. And also recognizing those times that fruit has been there. And recalling that. And giving us what we need during those times when it's dry to keep going forward. One of the things that I reflect on quite a bit when it's dry for me is going back to an experience that I had when I was an associate at St. Patrick's in Fremont. And when I was there was a pastor and there was 3 associates in the parish. One of them was from Africa, and then 2 of us from the Archdiocese. It was a busy place, being the only church in Fremont. 3 nursing homes, a hospital. We had a junior high and high school. They have a grade school now, or grade school again there. But it was always, there's something always going on. And as an associate, my responsibilities is that I taught the juniors at Bergen. I was in charge of liturgy, RCIA, attended parish council and finance council meetings. In 1 year, I had 26 funerals, and I had 32 weddings. And so meeting with couples and doing marriage prep. And so I would meet with a couple. After dinner, I met with a couple at 6:30, 7:30, 8:30, and 9:30 every evening. That I didn't have other meetings that were going on. I also coach volleyball. And so things were crazy there. And I was always going. And fortunately, at the time, I was 28 years old, 29 years old. I look at it now, and there's no way I would be doing that today. I just can't do that. I physically cannot do that any longer. And that's why the pastor assigned a lot of that to us younger associates to do. But when we were there, every weekend, one of us were on call. Every day, someone was on call. But if you had the weekend call, that meant you had the Saturday evening Mass, you had the late Mass on Sunday morning, you had the baptisms, and you had the Sunday evening Mass. But even though you had the late morning Mass, you still had to be up early because you had to open up the rectory for the people that were coming in and out of the rectory and other things that were going on. And I was on call this particular day. And I hit the ground running. The phone was ringing early in the morning. Before the Mass, I got called up to the hospital to anoint someone. I came back and celebrated Mass and did the baptisms, and then I was setting up for another baptism. And I was just worn out. And I was frustrated. I'd really been struggling at that moment in my life about priesthood and wondering, is this really what I want to do the rest of my life? And the old church in Fremont had a little side chapel that had the Blessed Sacrament. And I went and sat down in a pew in this little chapel and just kind of let it out. Not vocally, but in my prayer to the Lord. My frustration, my sadness, my doubt. And as I finished with that, I was just sitting there. And I've never experienced this before. I haven't experienced it since. I felt Christ presently holding me. That it was a physical presence. I didn't see it, but I felt embraced and held. And then my prayer changed with words, thank you for the privilege to serve. And tears came. And I sat there the longest time. And I eventually got up, went back up to the hospital to visit the person that I had anointed earlier, to visit with the family, to see how things were going. I came back and celebrated the evening Mass, then went back over to the house, and I got an interesting phone call. It was a woman she just lived a couple houses from the church. She was in charge of the environments in the church. And so she decorated, and especially for the seasons, and she had an incredible eye, very talented woman. And she called and she said, what did you preach on tonight? And I started to tell her what my homily was. I don't know why she was calling and asking. And I started, and she goes, no, what did you preach on? I said, I don't know, why are you asking what? And she goes, my husband and my son just came back from Mass, and they said it was the best homily you'd ever given. I was at 11 o'clock Mass, it was okay. What did you preach on? Nothing was different. At least in my mind, it wasn't. It was the same outline. Now, as you know, I have an outline right here. A lot of times for my homilies, I have an outline in my head. There's a few quotes that I may want to use. But if you listen to all three of my homilies this weekend, you'll notice there's a little bit of difference in them, because I don't write things out and it's not exactly the same, but it is the same format. What was different, and I knew it was different when she said that, it was what happened that afternoon. It was the fruit of that. And that's something that I hold on to now. When things are dry, I remember that moment. And those moments don't come unless we're faithful in being there, and being vulnerable and being open to the Lord. They're not going to come all the time. I may not have an experience like that again. You know, Mother Teresa, St. Teresa of Calcutta, it was said that she had this incredible experience when she made that decision to leave the Little Sisters of Loretto and to form her own order. And she had such a profound experience of Christ calling her. She never experienced that again. But she was faithful to that moment through the rest of her life. She even wrote her spiritual director, we had after her death, the letters that were exchanged back and forth about the doubts that creeped in, and sometimes that feeling of loneliness, feeling like the Lord was so distant. But she never moved away from what that one experience was. And when I'm feeling that dryness, that's what I go back to. I have that memory of that prayer and go back to that space. I can seat myself again in that chapel. That church is closed now. The old church is closed. But I can be there. The Lord desires for us to draw in with prayer. That's how he's going to equip us. That's how we're going to encounter him. Through our prayer, our quiet time with him, our prayer with one another, and our prayer with the larger community, and especially in the Eucharist. It's simple. We don't have to make it complicated. We just have to do it. And the disciples asked Jesus to teach them to pray. He taught them. Let us stand and pray together. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil.
Mike, you have to tell us one Doris story.
What's that?
You have to tell us one Doris story.
A Doris story? I'll tell you one quick Doris story.
Okay.
Doris, Father Joe, when one of the summers that I was there at Fremont, he was in residence there while he was in the seminary. And so living with Father Dave Korth and myself and Father Cesar Dralega in the rectory. And Doris was our housekeeper. You know, I mentioned this weekend, one of the things I miss is not having a housekeeper. She was our cook, and she would cook an evening meal. She'd do our shopping for us also. So we'd put things on for what we were going to shop for. I'll tell you two quick stories. One of them has to do with Joe. Joe would sit in the kitchen there at the old rectory in Fremont, and he'd be reading the Fremont Tribune. And in the back pages, they had kind of the want ads, and they also had the couples looking for someone else. And so he kept on pointing out to Doris all these old men that were available. Doris said she had already buried one husband. She wasn't going to take care of anyone else. She was taking care of us four priests and Joe. She didn't need anyone else to take care of. But Doris, she would be very responsive. But at the time, I wanted bagels. And so I put bagels on the list, and she didn't get them, and I put bagels on the list again. And at that time, my priest support group was coming there. And two of the guys had been in Fremont before. And she had made brownies, which was one of the priest's favorites, and brought those in. And then she also went and bought candy, which was another one of those priest's favorites who are no longer there. And I was in the front office, and I was talking to our secretary, and I talked in a very loud voice, knowing that Doris was back in the kitchen. And I said, you know, it's great that Doris was able to get those things that those other priests like, but you think I could get a bagel in this damn place? And she comes marching down the hall, grabs me by the collar, and drags me to the kitchen and points at the counter and goes, "What the hell are those?" But she was a great lady. When she died when I was there, unfortunately, and one of her daughters gave me this. It is a stained glass angel. And it's been in my kitchen. It was in my kitchen here at St. Pius. It's in my kitchen now at Our Lady of Lourdes. It's always that reminder. I think of Doris so often. she was a great joy to be around. I'm going to throw in one other thing. Just a reminder that if there's going to be a collection basket each night, and as I said, this is for Catholic Charities. And if you want to make out a check, you can directly to Catholic Charities. For those that are live streaming, you can make a donation at ccomaha.org. And any of you can go online to do that if you'd rather do it that way too. And thank you for being here tonight. I invite you to come back tomorrow. We're going to take things a little bit out of order because I'm going with the order of the pastoral priorities. And so tomorrow, instead of fasting, we're going to do almsgiving.
Lead us from death to life, from falsehood to truth, from despair to hope, from fear to trust. Lead us from hate to love, from war to peace. Let peace fill our hearts, let peace fill our world, let peace fill our universe. Too many lonely hearts, so many broken lives, longing for love to break into their darkness. Let justice roll, let mercy put down. Come and teach us your way of compassion. Lead us from death to life, from falsehood to truth, from despair to hope, from fear to trust. Lead us from hate to love, from war to peace. Let peace fill our hearts, let peace fill our world, let peace fill our universe. Let justice ever roll, let mercy fill the earth. Let us begin to grow into your people. We can bring love, we can bring peace. Your way of compassion. Lead us from death to life, from falsehood to truth, from despair to hope, from fear to trust. Lead us from hate to love, from war to peace. Let peace fill our hearts, let peace fill our world, let peace fill our universe.
Lord be with you. May Almighty God bless you, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Have a great night. Hope to see you tomorrow night.